This is New River Gorge National Park and Preserve. It's known for hiking, climbing, paddling. You can even base jump here. And up until a few weeks ago, it was known as New River Gorge National River. So what is it that makes a national park a national park? Or a national river a national river? Turns out the name of a national park can tell you a lot about what you'll find there and how the National Park Service manages that park. These are the 19 types of national parks. If you want to learn more about parks and protected lands, please consider liking this video and subscribing below. Let's get started. The first and most well-known type of national park are the national parks themselves. Considered the crown jewels of the NPS, national parks encompass some of the world's most famous natural places. They include immensely popular parks like Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon, as well as less traveled parks like North Cascades and the Dry Tortugas. No matter how much they're visited though, national parks are generally larger areas that protect several types of resources, whether those are environmental, cultural, or historical. Their size and scope makes for better overall conservation because they're able to protect entire ecosystems or sensitive areas. And when combined with the fact that national parks don't allow certain consumptive activities like mining or hunting, national parks are some of the most well-protected natural places in America. Similar to national parks are the national preserves. Like national parks, they protect larger areas and more diverse resources. The difference here is that national preserves do allow extractive or consumptive activities like hunting, mining, or even oil exploration. You can often see these in combination with national parks in Alaska, where they permit hunting in the preserve portion of the park while maintaining a more traditional national park in the remaining portion. This combination was also recently approved in the lower 48 for only the second time at New River Gorge National Park in West Virginia. The third type of national park, national reserves, are again similar to both national parks and national preserves. They protect the same types of resources as the previous two, large, resource-rich areas, but the difference is in the way the land is managed. Here, the NPS typically manages national reserves in partnership with state and local entities, where they may provide funding or technical assistance. National reserves are relatively rare, though, as there are only two in the national park system, those of the City of Rocks in Idaho and Ebey's Landing in Washington state. Next on the list are national monuments, which can be a bit tricky. I'm planning on dedicating a future video entirely to them, but for now, there are a few things that distinguish national monuments from other national parks. First, they're the only NPS units that can be established by the President because of the Antiquities Act, although they can still be established by Congress as well. National monuments established by the President are sometimes redesignated by Congress based on what type of resource they protect. And this is a key difference between national parks and national monuments because national monuments often only protect a single resource, rather than the several resources protected by national parks. And it's worth mentioning that not all national monuments are part of the national park system. For example, Bears Ears National Monument, which is managed by the U.S. Forest Service, and Grand Staircase Escalante has been in the news recently as well. It's operated by the Bureau of Land Management. So you've got national monuments in places like Devil's Tower in rural Wyoming, or you've even got them in bustling cities like the Statue of Liberty in New York. So these are a bit of a catch-all designation with protections for ecological, cultural, and historical areas. Next up are the national recreation areas. As their name implies, these areas have a focus on recreation. Things like boating, hunting, and fishing are often mentioned in the enabling legislation for these parks. They were originally centered around Bureau of Reclamation reservoirs after rivers were dammed and focused on providing water-based recreation. But they're also popular designations for parks near urban areas, such as Golden Gate National Recreation Area in San Francisco or the Gateway National Recreation Area in New York City. Another primarily recreational designation are the national lake shores and seashores. These parks focus on coastal, water-based recreation activities, and their facilities often reflect this since they typically have extensive roads and parking lots for beach access. Currently, all four national lake shores are located on the Great Lakes, although they don't have to be, and the national seashores are dispersed along the Atlantic, Gulf, and Pacific coasts. The next two types of parks are technically different, but are essentially the same when it comes to what they protect and how they're managed. National rivers, as well as wild and scenic rivers, are designated under the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, which aims to preserve undisturbed rivers, meaning no dams or obstructions, and their surrounding areas. They're obviously centered on water-based recreation like paddling, but you can also hike or sometimes even hunt depending on the enabling legislation. Next up are the National Scenic Trails. There are only 3 of these managed as full units by the National Park Service, although there are other trails which the Park Service considers affiliated areas, which I'll talk about later. Established under the National Trail System Act, National Scenic Trails protect long-distance footpaths for recreation, primarily hiking. Perhaps the most famous of these is the Appalachian Trail, which winds through 14 states from Georgia to Maine and attracts millions of hikers annually. Similar to National Scenic Trails, but focused primarily on driving, are the National Parkways. These roadways and their surrounding parklands give motorists the opportunity to experience scenic areas from the comfort of their cars. There are 4 parkways in the National Park system, including the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is renowned for its scenic vistas and spectacular fall colors. The remaining types of parks are a bit different because they primarily protect areas of historic, cultural, or military significance. The first of which are the National Historic Sites, which focus on the preservation of historically significant areas. These sites protect mostly individual structures or buildings and tend to be smaller in size. This designation can be used for military areas, but other designations are available, which I'll touch on soon. Although a separate designation, the Park Service does manage one international historic site with Parks Canada, that of St. Croix Island along the border between Maine and New Brunswick, which protects the site of an early French settlement in the area. In a similar vein, you have the National Historical Parks, which have the same mission and management strategies as National Historic Sites, but are often bigger. They incorporate multiple buildings or entire areas and may include parkland if they're located in more rural areas. These next 4 parks are the military parks, which in some form or another protect places with military significance. These include national battlefields, national battlefield sites, of which there's only one, national battlefield parks, and national military parks. With these, you'll primarily see Revolutionary War and Civil War sites like Antietam, Gettysburg, or Cowpens, and battlefield parks and military parks tend to be larger, but this isn't necessarily the case with all of the military designations. Finally, there are the national memorials. These parks are commemorative in nature because they honor significant people, places, or events from the past. Nearly 1/3 of national memorials are located in Washington, D.C., since national memorials don't have to be located where a person lived or died, or where a significant event happened to be designated. And really quickly, I just want to touch on what the National Park Service calls their 11 other designations for areas that are managed by the National Park Service in and around Washington, D.C. They don't necessarily fall into one of the categories covered previously, but they're still part of the National Park Service. And affiliated areas are, for the most part, not part of the National Park system, but protect areas that have similar significance or value to other National Park Service properties, so they sometimes manage these or provide technical assistance or funding. I'm planning to cover these in more detail in a future video. So that's it. Those are the 19 different types of national parks. Stay tuned for more Parks and Protected Lands content. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.